All right, today we have Tristan from Zeta Markets. Tristan, I think very recently I did a tweet and it was about making it in crypto. There's quite a lot of people that commented, but one of the things that happened was you commented and I shared back that you are definitely what I consider the template for the founder that makes it in crypto. And famously on your pinned tweet, you have this little picture and tweet about peak crypto life, and it's just a bare room, your laptop, and a mattress on the floor. I thought that's a great place to start about telling us who you are, how you got started in crypto, and what you do today.
Sounds good. Thanks for the introduction there. So I'm the founder of Zeta Markets. We're building a Perps exchange, the fastest on-chain Perps exchange that we could possibly build. That was always the vision from day one. How did I get into this spot that I wanted to build it? I guess I got started in crypto back in 2017, more on the trading side and just kind of crypto curious, playing around with what was possible in the ecosystem. And so that was a good introduction, but I guess unfortunately I never got into the space really deeply as like a founder or a builder, and took a bit of a break, I guess, through the bear market that ensued after 2017, 2018. So I actually missed out on DeFi summer, which I was a bit gutted by in retrospect. I went and worked in kind of more the AI field, doing data science and machine learning stuff for a couple of years, which was super interesting and definitely scratched my itch for some of those kind of like more technical roles. And then I think over time, after having done a bunch of that, I wanted to get back into the startup field, and crypto seemed like a pretty interesting way to do it, just because it's very easy to get. I wouldn't say it's easy to get started, but it's ideas are quick. I was looking at the Uniswap contract back in December of 2020, and I was amazed that this 80 lines of code was able to swap billions of dollars a day on Ethereum. And so that kind of inspired me to start playing around with smart contracts on Ethereum. I just hacked around with a few things, and we had the idea, let's build an exchange and do something on the derivative side, because that was kind of quite underrepresented, I guess, in the DeFi space. Spot was really dominant, lending was dominant, but derivatives hadn't really taken off in a big way. And so, we started building that out on Ethereum. Obviously had a lot of struggles with what's possible there, and just kind of hit a bit of a brick wall, and started looking around at other ecosystems. A lot of these layer twos hadn't yet launched and were quite early in their development. So those were not feasible. And Solana really caught our eye as just being something interesting and having high performance, and something that we could kind of actually build something interesting on. And I guess from my perspective as well, being an engineer, I really wanted to learn Rust. I wanted to learn a lot of this kind of high performance software stuff. And so that's what kind of drew us to it. And really it just started by reaching out to their team. They put me on a call with Tolly in the really early days, managed to just chat about interesting stuff about cryptography and how the Solana runtime works. And I was really thrilled at that point. I was like, I'm sold. This sounds amazing. And I'm really glad that there's some people out there building very interesting stuff and parallelizing crypto and just making it so much faster and accessible. And we just basically enrolled in a Solana hackathon, and that's how we got started on Solana. And we've been building ever since.
And famously, you won the first ever Solana hackathon. Do you think that kind of cemented your confidence and momentum to decide to do Solana and stick with it? Because, you started with that and you spent 3 years, including a very long time painfully during the bear market, and never really shifted. And I wonder what really kept you that way, and what sold you on Solana with such strong conviction.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what got me started in the first place was I'd already basically quit my job by the time I entered the hackathon. Literally the day of entering the hackathon, I handed in my resignation. And so that was me kind of taking the leap of faith. And I think a lot of founders, to be honest, kind of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out when they're starting a new startup. They're like, oh yeah, I'll stick to my, my safe FANG job or something or other. I'll be working as a software engineer or as a trader, getting paid a lot. And I'll just kind of dabble on some kind of crypto project on the side. And you see a lot of examples of that. A lot of them, obviously, I think because they can't commit enough time or not willing to kind of get behind it and take the leap of faith. The thing really never kind of takes off. It just is this curiosity thing. And then it just kind of dies out, because you realize that there's a lot more than just tech and writing a bit of code. There's a whole kind of process behind doing a successful company. So that was kind of a way for me to sense check myself and just kind of force myself to take the plunge and just go, all in. And same with my like co-founders as well. They kind of eventually quit. And so we went full time and just decided, screw it, let's give this our best shot. And it was fortunate, I guess, that we put in so much time. We worked like 100 hours a week. I was sleeping on the floor and on the couch of my co-founder's place, and we managed to win that hackathon, through like sheer perseverance. And I think that kind of crystallized it for me. After that, I was just like, okay, clearly we can do something here. I had like no network in crypto, or very limited network, and very limited understanding of how things worked, I think, back at that time. But the fact that we could just build and prove essentially on a technical perspective that we were worth paying attention to, and that we could do good things in the space. That's kind of what crystallized for me of like, let's give this a crack. So that was good. We obviously got a bit of notoriety, and it helped us with fundraising and just helped get our product out there and just get some recognition, which is always hard as like a upstart project. So that was really good, and highly recommend those hackathons if there's anyone in the audience who wants to get started in Solana or any other ecosystem for that matter. I think those are great ways to get started. And then I guess our conviction was, we thought a lot of the design decisions made sense in terms of Solana. There were plenty of hiccups in the road, but the fact that it had 100 times, 1,000 times the performance of, Ethereum and other kind of comparable networks, we thought that's not like a 1 point, it's not like a 2x increase or even a 10x increase. Like, this is orders of magnitude improvement, which is kind of what we're looking for with DeFi. So that kind of helped us stick it through. And building on a new network, I feel like is exciting. There's new barriers to kind of clear, and new challenges and obstacles. So I think that kind of definitely kept us going in the first year. And the bull market, I think, was ripping for Solana. It went to $250, and then unfortunately the bear market was pretty tough. Solana down to $8. And for me, I think definitely like questioned my judgment. Like, did I do the right thing? Is Solana going to make it? And kind of deep down in my mind, I felt like nothing has changed about the fundamentals. I feel like the network still works really well. There are still 2,000 validators. It's still very fast. The fundamentals are super rock solid, but the perception and sentiment was rock bottom at that point, largely thanks to FTX and certain other things that happen. And in my mind, I just figured I know the most about the tech and how this thing works. And I feel like the network really has legs, and it's really like cemented itself as the number 2 behind Ethereum. And yeah, just after long chats with our investors and thinking about things, I'm like, no, I really feel like if the market's going to come back, Solana's going to do well. Like, it's here to stay. And that ended up being the right decision.
So you wrote on your blog that Solana is the only capable chain of supporting your vision at scale. So can you explain why is that? Why is the Solana the only chain for Zeta Markets?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's this like meme that got really popular maybe a year ago, just called like Only Possible in Solana, and everyone went around basically showing the things that could be built on Solana that weren't possible anywhere else. And we're like a prime example of that. So when we started, there was a protocol called Serum, and that was all building on-chain order books essentially. So if you're familiar with AMMs, that's kind of how the status quo has been on the Ethereum side. And just because block times are very slow, fees are expensive, all these kind of things mean that you can't actually do an order book on chain. And that paradigm kind of shifted when those guys figured, hey, we can build a fully on-chain matching engine. And that was a light bulb moment for us as well, because we looked at that and we're like, that's pretty incredible. We don't have to deal with this impermanent loss and like poor price slippage that you kind of typically have in AMMs. We can start building something that's like traditional finance, or like, centralized crypto finance, which is an order book protocol. And so that's kind of how we got started with that. And yeah, just keep building out that kind of vision for on-chain order books, but on the kind of perps and derivatives side. And so that, yeah, just absolutely isn't possible on any other chain that as far as I've seen, maybe like Sui or one of these ones. I know they're trying to build on-chain order books, but Solana was definitely the first. And I think it's because of the throughput. You need to be able to, we process probably a couple of million transactions a day. And I think we've processed more transactions than Uniswap has in its lifetime, which is kind of crazy to think. But that's just because you can just kind of fire so much stuff through the chain, and market makers are updating their quotes every second. There's just like a lot of on-chain activity that's happening. So yeah, really, like, I think the specs of Solana are what makes that possible.
You mentioned about the specs of Solana, and you're talking about the scale of it. So I think there was another quote that you said before, which is about being able to process upwards of 1 million transactions per second, far outcompetes existing large-scale payment networks like Mastercard and Visa. So I think that's kind of like the long-term vision of how Solana will scale, right? Recently as well, there's been the congestion issues of Solana. That's probably due to obviously the huge increase in acceleration of usage and the number of transactions going through the network. So kind of like where are we now in terms of that scale of Solana? And I think it's probably a great time as well if you wanted to talk about Zeta's vision, which is already right now broke into like the top 11, top 12 in terms of Perps DEX in DeFi and how that takes it forward with, for example, a potential L2 on Solana. So there's quite a lot of questions worked into that, but I think it's all around scaling and achieving what you need to do with the Perps DEX that you want to build.
Yeah, sure thing. So where Solana's at right now is it's definitely the highest throughput network anywhere. I think I'm pretty sure it also has the highest, daily active users. Platforms like Jupiter and Tensor and Zeta and all these ones are really killing it at the moment, and great to see the kind of adoption and how it's actually scaling. Whereas I think in like previous cycles or previous spikes with Solana, the chain has gone down and it's struggled under some of the congestion, the load, the spam. We're seeing it become a lot more robust and kind of anti-fragile, I guess, to a lot of this stuff, which is really great. That's to say, like we still have some teething issues, I guess, with the Solana network, and those come mostly in the form of congestion. So it's a little bit different to Ethereum. Ethereum usually have these gas spikes. Everyone's trying to bid up these block space auctions essentially, and people are trying to include them in the blocks, and the price just spirals, and you end up having to pay like hundreds of dollars to submit like simple transactions. Solana has the opposite problem. It's trying to build blocks basically on the fly in real time. And what people tend to do is just like absolutely hammer the nodes with like millions of network requests and just be like, hey, I've got this transaction included. And so what actually ends up happening is these nodes start getting overloaded and they start dropping a bunch of these transactions. They just kind of like can't process them. They can't fit them in anymore. And so that's created this annoying problem, which has definitely plagued us for like the last couple of weeks, I guess, which is transactions will just get dropped. You go to send an order, it will get sent, and then it just won't get heard about on the leader, and that block, it will just basically never make it into the block, unfortunately. But Solana's been rolling out a bunch of really good fixes and updates. One is to the priority fee markets, which comes in Solana runtime 1.18, which should be rolling out to like full production mainnet this end of this month. That helps with priority fees and making them more reliable. So I guess in a somewhat similar vein to Ethereum, now because Solana is so cheap, you can actually add kind of like a tip or a priority fee, which will increase your probability of getting into the block, and that kind of helps as like a anti-spam economic measure to get you into the block. It makes it actually more expensive to spam, which disincentivizes that. And then the other bit is just like they definitely have some minor kind of fixes, or maybe slightly major fixes, that need to be fixed on the Solana networking stack with respect to these drop transactions. And the fix that just came out last week is this stake-weighted quality of service. Bit of a nerdy term, but basically it means that a bunch of the incoming connections for the guy who's building the block are kind of reserved for people with a lot of stake. So you don't have these like low stake or no stake validators or RPCs that are just like hammering the network. It's going through kind of reputable high stake operators. So you can kind of filter down, I guess, the really crappy spammy traffic. And so far, we've been testing it. Our engineers have been kind of implementing this thing in the last couple of days, and it's just like led to a massive improvement. Instead of things taking like 5 or 10 seconds to get an order through on Zeta, it's now getting down to like less than 2 seconds, maybe even 1 second, which is fantastic to see. And so I guess the second part of your question is, what's the roadmap from here for Zeta? What are we trying to achieve in the next 6 months? And so in light of some of these issues, we've kind of been putting our heads together and thinking like, how can we scale this even more? Currently, we've built this platform that has over 100,000 users, that's done $6 billion in volume, all very impressive stats. And I think we're very dominant in the Solana ecosystem. I would say we're number 2 by volume, and we're pretty close to like top 10 in terms of like Perps volume across all dexes, across all chains, which is really cool to see for a fully on-chain order book, everything running in a smart contract. And then the next step is, we have this grander vision, like how do we take on, the top Perps players, which are, the centralized exchanges as well. These guys are doing still the lion's share. I think it's probably still 80-90% of derivatives volume on crypto is probably still going through centralized exchanges as opposed to dexes. And I think in light of myself and many other people getting rugged by platforms like FTX. I think we want to see more stuff go on chain. We want to see more people using DeFi. And so the more that we can kind of alleviate those kind of UX issues, those performance issues that people choose not to use DeFi for, we want to get to this position where DeFi feels amazing. It feels as good as your kind of regular apps. And then we also get the security, the transparency of DeFi. So we've made a decision to try and build a scaling, I wouldn't say a scaling solution, but a layer 2 for Solana that will let us do a bunch of our order book matching in a more scalable way off chain. It's going to increase the throughput of our network a bunch more. It's going to reduce the latencies to something that's extremely competitive with centralized exchanges, like 10 or 20 milliseconds, as opposed to, say, 400 milliseconds on Solana. And that's really great for market makers and professional traders who can just provide much more liquidity, much tighter. And then we can alleviate a bunch of UX issues as well. If you've used Zeta, you have to sign every transaction. And when the order book's moving very fast, I think that can be kind of a bit tricky to do. And unfortunately, we don't have, command over the wallet layer and stuff like that. So once we have this L2, we're going to be able to abstract a bunch of the transaction signing using, session keys and things like that. And then we can also do things with potentially abstracting away gas fees and just making it really feel like a incredible exchange, but still retaining all the benefits of being on a public chain.
That's very interesting. So that's really about moving a lot of centralized server traders on chain by giving them that performance that they are used to, but also the benefits of on chain. But I do have a question here, right? Because in the past, Solana builders have looked at, for example, Ethereum and L2s and said, look, this whole, Ethereum can't scale. You got all these L2s. Now you're going to have 500 L2s. And see, Solana is this monolithic chain. We have a monolithic culture. We're all building together. Now you guys, EVM, are fragmenting liquidity, fragmenting users. So what do you think about that? Because now people are looking at plans like this and going, so now Solana needs L2 to scale? Or do you think like it's just a useless question to ask? It's really, really about the use case and the benefit it brings to users.
Yeah, I think we definitely got a little bit of pushback initially because people are like, this is narrative violation. Solana is all about monolithic L1s and everything running on the single global state machine. And that's what I love about Solana, to be honest. And what drew us there originally was that kind of vision. And I think it still rings completely true for like the majority of apps. Honestly, like Jupiter couldn't work on fragmented L2s and app chains. It's got to plug into multiple dexes, atomically be able to kind of stack transactions and trades between all of them. That wouldn't be possible unless you're on like a really scalable kind of L1. So I think, all these like spot lending, NFTs, just kind of like a no-brainer on Solana. And they work so much better. Why do we think, NFTs took off on Solana? Why do we think meme coins took off on Solana? Why do we think Jupe is just absolutely crushing it right now? It's just because Solana works super well for these use cases. But in our case, what I'm kind of trying to optimize for here is really performance over everything. And when it comes to perps, that's really important. You're dealing with leverage. You're dealing with trades that need to execute extremely quickly. There's kind of like risk on the table as opposed to like spot. You don't have to worry about liquidations and other things like that. So the worry for us is if you're building on a chain where you can potentially run into congestion hotspots and there's like a big liquidation event going on, the price of some asset is really moving rapidly. It might be hard to kind of take risk off on all those positions. We've had definitely issues in the past where people have been unable to like close their positions. And that's kind of like a tough customer support thing to go through. And I think, with the recent like congestion issues, it's really nice to have isolated block space and be able to kind of customize some of the parameters to really fit around perps and building like the perfect kind of exchange for that. And the reason why I think it's fine is because perps don't really need that much composability, right? Like it's its own kind of trading super app in a sense. People can go in there, they can trade all these different assets. There are some things you could potentially build on top of it, but I think largely, a lot of perp stuff is standalone and can work really well. And just being able to optimize for performance, I think, kind of lends itself to, designs like L2s. So I guess to summarize my opinions there, I still think 90% of the use cases should still be on the L1 and are crushing it on the L1. And I think there are kind of some niche use cases, maybe perp stuff. I've seen people building really interesting like payment solutions also on their own kind of ideas of L2s, maybe gaming or something or other where you have a lot more throughput and a lot more kind of actions where you don't need to store absolutely everything on chain. Things like that might definitely make sense to me. And it's kind of like novel ground. So I'm just kind of keen to explore it and see what we can build there.
So you mentioned Perps, which is for non-trading people, the shortened version of perpetuals. And you also wrote in one of your blogs, I will be throwing around the quotes. I've read a couple of your pieces, but you wrote that Perps should be accessible for everyone. And I'm wondering, why is that so important in Web3 and maybe in traditional finance as well?
Yeah, I think it's become the predominant instrument for trading, I think, in the crypto space. I honestly don't know why it hasn't taken off more in traditional finance. But you're definitely seeing stuff with like options trading on Robinhood and things like that, where people can kind of have somewhat of a like leverage in their trades. Definitely helps with capital efficiency. So the kind of key difference between derivatives, particularly like, perpetual futures and spot, is you get this leverage. So it means with $1 of capital or $1 of margin, you can actually place on, a trade that's worth $2 or $5 or $10 or whatever it might be. There is, risk associated with that, obviously, but it's kind of like, it lets you, I guess, be more certain with your trades, or kind of add to the conviction of your trades. If you really feel like Solana is going to moon tomorrow, you can kind of size up your bet, and you don't have to be, you don't have to have $1 million in your bank account to be able to take, significant positions. So I think having that primitive is pretty incredible. And I've looked at the stats of what does the majority of the price action and price discovery in crypto markets. And it really seems to be driven by the Perps market. That always tends to be leading. It's the most liquid market. If you want to get into a position that's like long sol, you're always going to be dealing with cheaper fees and much tighter spreads on the Perps market as opposed to the spot market on something, say, like Binance. And so it's just become the de facto thing for crypto traders to trade. And so I think taking that great product already and then just being able to like distribute that, have more people access it, is pretty cool. And I think the beautiful thing about Perps as well is it's kind of like a synthetic instrument. Like I don't actually need a physical Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin network to be able to list a market on Bitcoin. I can just go and take a price feed from some oracle essentially, and people can kind of trade based on that. Any kind of time series you can kind of list a market on, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, can you share which positions are the most popular ones in Zeta Markets?
Yeah, because we're a Solana platform, I think the natural choice there is for people to actually trade SOL, the asset. That does like definitely the majority of volume on our platform. Everyone's, pretty bullish SOL these days, and it's been a great trade. Like, I bought back into SOL at like in the kind of $10 to $20 range, and what's it trading at now? Like, it's getting close to $200 again. So that's been pretty incredible. And I think there are a bunch of Solana maxis and Solana diehard people that have been sitting on their bags since 6 months ago and are kind of up big. And I think they're waiting for Solana to hit $500 or whatever it might be. I don't kind of do price predictions, but I think people are super bullish, and that's why the Solana market trades a lot. Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're kind of like the Lindy coins, obviously the kind of blue chips that most people trade. They have the most liquidity, so it's kind of natural. And then we've tried to pivot a lot of our focus, I guess, on newer markets, especially around the Solana ecosystem. So we were very quick to list Jito market when it came out, Jupe market. We have like Bonk and Whiff. We don't go too degen with like doing like really like low liquidity meme coins and stuff like that, but the ones that have started to get into the top 100, we feel like they're reasonably liquid to actually list markets on. And I think there's going to be a bunch more Solana ecosystem tokens coming out. So I think kind of supplying Perps for them will definitely be pretty cool.
So the goal here is to onboard a lot more traders on chain. But if you look, let's say, at DeFi Llama and you look at the Perps markets, so Zeta's sitting pretty somewhere around number 11 right now by volume. But there's just from that table like 20 alone who are competing. And then obviously you probably have like, over 100 Perps dexes, right? So maybe as a primer for those who are trying to figure out, which Perps platform do I use? How do I get on chain? What should I use in terms of reference to make a decision, which platform should I choose over another? How should people look at Zeta and how it's different from the options that they have in the market?
Yeah, good question. It's definitely a competitive space, and there are heaps of Perps platforms out there. I would say the things that we have going for them is we have three principles. One is speed, one is security, and the other one is just like usability and ease of access. So speed, we've always been thinking about how can we build, the fastest Perps experience possible. We know when you can kind of compare it to these slower platforms, if you use like a GMX or something or other, it's definitely going to take you a lot longer to place trades. You're talking about things that take 10 seconds as opposed to like 1 second. So it doesn't feel like this like live trading experience. And then you have to deal with an AMM and there's kind of all kinds of pricing inefficiencies there. Whereas in an order book system, Zeta gives you much better pricing. We're continually working on sizing up liquidity and working with more market makers to make that really competitive. I would go out on a limb and say that our liquidity is quite a lot more competitive than some of the other Perps exchanges on Solana at the moment, just because we have a really stacked roster of very good liquidity providers. And yeah, we just optimize for speed. Our team comes from like HFT world. They really care about this stuff. I mean, there's only so fast you can kind of get it on chain and in a distributed system, because it's like the speed of light around the world is kind of your constraint there. But we get pretty close, and I feel like we try and optimize it so it feels pretty good. So typically when you trade on Zeta, at least pre-congestion, it was a couple of 100 milliseconds to place trades. Now it's probably closer to 1 second, hopefully not more than 2 seconds. So to the average user, I think that's like pretty good, pretty acceptable. And then the thing is, all the smart contract logic runs on chain. So you can go and you can place a trade and you can look straight away at that transaction, see what's happened on chain. You can kind of audit everything. Everything's self-custodied, so you kind of own your own assets, which is really great, in comparison to, say, a centralized exchange where you basically give up custody. And then in terms of like accessibility and usability there, that's something we focus on a lot. I would say our front end is pretty snappy, and we've tried to make it feel and look pretty good to use. And we also have like a mobile app for people who like to trade on the fly. I think that's like really nice to be able to tap into. And then on the security point, that's something we take pretty seriously. We have a bunch of mechanisms and measures in the platform that keep people safe. There's definitely been a bunch of exploits, I guess, both in and out of the Solana space, especially around some of these derivatives platforms. And, touch wood, but, I'd like to say that for the 3 years of operation, we've never had any exploits. And I think a large part of that is down to us just like taking a really good approach to kind of risk and security there.
Cool. So moving to the last couple of questions that I have, obviously, the Z token, which is the governance token for Zeta Markets, is coming up soon. Zeta Markets has already announced this. People are pretty much highly expecting this. What do you think this will mark as a milestone for Zeta as a protocol, as a community? What do you hope to get out of this with the TG?
Yeah, good question. So I guess the background is we've been building for over 3 years now, and we made the very conscious decision to not launch the token in the early days because I think it was when I was at Korea Blockchain Week, there was an interview with CZ or something or other, and something that stuck with me is he said, "No token before product market fit." And I was just like, you're right. Yes, we saw so many people kind of launch their token hastily in Solana 2021, and I think it's just been down only price performance, and they kind of launched it maybe like pre-product or when they had like very basic product working. And I'm very glad that we didn't do that, because now we have like a real audience. We have a lot of users who actually care about and use our platform. And so now I think is a much more interesting time to launch a token and go down the kind of decentralization path. So being able to buy in the community into governance in terms of some of the decisions of how the platform operates and the kind of future of it, as well as even more trivial stuff like, just like what markets we list and some of the parameters around that. I think that's really cool. It's also a good way for people to kind of share in the success of the platform. So we'll be giving out pretty significant amount of our rewards. So 10% in an airdrop that's going to be coming out. So for people who have been a long time supporter of Zeta, who've traded a bunch, who've been really active and supported us, they'll get pretty healthily rewarded. And then going forward, post airdrop, there's going to be 30% that's basically set aside for ongoing incentives and rewards. So the more you trade on the exchange, this is the cool edge, I guess, that we have over like a fintech product or maybe a centralized exchange is you trade on Zeta and then ideally you make money, on your P&L. And then we also kind of give out emissions and incentives on top of that. So you kind of top up your Zeta balance as well. So I think that's another good way to kind of reward usage and start to kind of buy more of the community into the product and have them basically like own a share of the kind of governance power of the platform.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask from the funded perspective, what are the biggest challenges during the TGE? It looks like it's a quite simple, not a simple, but quite a fast process. But from what I've seen, it's super. It takes a lot of stakeholders. It takes a lot of financial resources, human resources. So I'm curious, what are the challenges? First of all, launching the token and launching on Solana. Second of all.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I've been learning this the hard way the last couple of months. So I think to maybe the external audience or people who haven't launched a token before, or done one of these like crypto startups, you might think, hey, it's as easy as just minting a token on the blockchain and just putting a ERC20 or SPL token out there and then calling it a day and just being like, yep, that's our token done. But the reality is there's a lot more of it to it than that. There's just like heaps of background work, essentially, like you said, coordinating with a bunch of different stakeholders, obviously, getting the initial liquidity for the token, working on kind of DeFi venues that are going to support you, like we're talking with like a bunch of the top Solana spot dexes to kind of get them to also bring us on, some of the bigger exchanges in the centralized side, dealing with kind of liquidity providers, and then just generally setting up a lot of the engineering in terms of token staking contracts, where we're doing this kind of vote escrow governance model as well. So that's kind of a fairly new thing that hasn't been done too much on Solana. So building out additional contracts and functionality for that takes time. And then I guess there's like a lot of compliance reviews and things like that, making sure you're compliant with, respective regulations and making sure you're kind of in the right position when it comes to launching the token, and setting up all the kind of structures around like proper governance and DAO formation definitely takes some time. So yeah, there's just like a lot of stakeholders and things to get done. I think having talked to a lot of these Solana founders, we all share a common experience that we thought, hey, we can bang this token out in like a month or two. We can kind of get live, shouldn't take too long. And really it's taken like 3 to 6 months, I think, for a lot of the top teams, even just from kind of inception of when they want to launch it to, actually getting out there and launching it. It's like a really long process. And it's definitely been hard for me to kind of go through that. Like I haven't taken much of a break in the last while. So, it's just been like a hard slog. And then I think the thing that doesn't really help so much is sometimes the community definitely like, bangs down your door a bit. They're like, when's it coming? When are you guys launching? I've been trading. They're all kind of like waiting for it to go live, and people are like, just launch it, get it out tomorrow or something like that, and I wish I could do that, but unfortunately that's like not the reality of the situation. And I think just kind of developing that thicker skin, where people can kind of complain a lot, and you got to just, keep them excited, keep them engaged, keep working towards the goal. And then, there's a light at the end of the tunnel to get this thing over the line.
The when boys will always be winning.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So Vault escrow, can you elaborate on that one? Because I have no idea what it is, and I think that our audience is very curious as well.
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit of a complex or confusing term. This is kind of pioneered by the Curve team. They're like a stable swap on Ethereum, probably like one of the best known ones. They pioneered this model for governance. And the TLDR, I guess, of how it works is it brings in a time component into the kind of staking mechanics. So instead of just purely staking, you can actually lock up your funds for like a time range window. It might be a month, or it might be a year or 4 years, or, but it basically bakes in the time component of like, how committed am I to the protocol? So imagine if, there's a governance vote and I was able to just kind of to stake 1 million tokens, vote on it, take my money back out and just kind of like dump it or something. There's all kinds of governance attacks that I think you've seen happen probably on the Ethereum side and potentially even on the Solana side, where people have gone, they've just bought a bunch of Uniswap tokens or something like that, or maybe one of these other protocols. They've gone and voted on a bunch of things, and then they've gone and like thrown the tokens away. That's a lot harder to do on the vote escrow side. You're actually taking the tokens that you have, you're kind of committing that I'm going to freeze them, I'm going to lock them up for a certain period of time, which means I'm kind of aligned long-term with the protocol. And then your governance power is essentially not just the amount of tokens, but it's kind of weighted, I guess, by the time period. So, depending on the curve that you use, it'll vary. But for example, if I were to kind of lock up 100 tokens, say, but I lock them up for 4 years, I might get, similar or even greater voting power than someone who might have locked up 200 or 400 tokens, but only done it for, a couple of days or for a month. And so that's a nice way to kind of balance like the whales, I guess, with the people who are extremely long-term as well. So the reason we wanted to do that is because we want people to be long-term about the product. I don't want people just to like grab the token, think about it in the short term, just see it as kind of an instrument for speculation. I want people to go ahead and be kind of involved in the community, be locking up for the long term, being able to like vote on kind of important decisions in the community. And ultimately, those people will get rewarded. The higher your kind of governance power, the more pro rata rewards you'll kind of receive for Zeta. So it's really rewarding people for being as long term as possible.
And do you have an idea what kind of decisions people, like holders of Z token, can vote for?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're still kind of fleshing out exact details. Like I said, there are very simple ones like new markets that we need to get listed. That's something that we kind of cast as a more or less informal vote in sometimes our Telegram chat or our Twitter. We just kind of put out a poll and see what people want to list next. But it's been great to see, for example, platforms like Jupiter, they have a launch pad and they get voting essentially on what the new projects are coming from the community. So for us to be able to support new markets on Zeta, say there's like a hot new Solana project that's coming out and they really want to get listed, I want those people essentially like buying Zeta tokens and being able to like vote and get their community to kind of get them listed on Zeta. That would be really cool. Yeah, so I think there's going to be like a lot of decisions as well as just like future direction and roadmap, what happens with some of the incentives and how they're directed. That's a big thing with like gauges in this kind of like vote escrow model is in the curve model, people will actually build up like a really big bag of this kind of vote escrow curve. And they will use that to vote on certain pools, essentially, for where the emissions for curve go. So I imagine kind of a similar model for Zeta. If someone is like, for example, it might be the Tensor team. We list the Tensor token. The Tensor team are like, really want, it's super good liquidity on the Tensor perp on Zeta. We want lots of people trading it. We want lots of Zeta rewards going to people who trade that market, like a disproportionate amount. And so they will go in there and they will essentially like go and get their community to vote to direct emissions towards that market and really like improve the liquidity and trading volume there.
Cool. So I think the last question from me right now is you recently shared that you'll be speaking at Solana Breakpoint this year. So I believe this is your third year in the role. Anything upcoming that you think you'd like to tease or maybe share or any expectation for people who would be there so that they should actually buy a ticket and turn up and have a chat with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a great conference. I've gone to every Breakpoint thus far, and it's been a fantastic conference, probably one of my favorite of the year. Might be biased because I like hanging out with all the Solana people. And this year it's in Singapore, which I think is pretty cool because that's like the home ground for me. So I don't have to travel, which is, a big plus. But I genuinely think it will be a really good conference. I actually ran kind of the first ever Solana event, a couple of years ago in Singapore. There was no Solana community. And when I moved here, I was definitely trying to like bootstrap and get more people into the ecosystem and kind of raise awareness. So being able to run some of those early events in Asia and kind of build up some of the Solana presence, I think, it definitely makes me feel great that the Solana Foundation has gone ahead and decided to kind of push more into Asia and do stuff in Singapore. So I think that's going to be really exciting. I think there's a big market to tap into here that's exciting. And in terms of Zeta specifically, like I think we're going to have a lot of improvements coming out in the next couple of months. We're launching multi-collateral, which means that you can kind of margin your perps in a variety of different assets, not just USDC. So people can do stuff like basis trading and really interesting trading strategies. I think it's just going to add a lot of flexibility. We're trying to improve kind of onboarding, on-ramping experiences as well. Like I really want to get to a place where anyone can just open up the website from their phone or wherever it might be. They don't need to have a crypto wallet necessarily. They can kind of do it all in app and have the wallet provisioned and have a decentralized on-ramp in there so they can kind of get started without having to like go via a centralized exchange or, transfer funds or set up a wallet manually and deal with, seed phrases. All these things are pretty clunky. So that's really cool. And then I think the biggest thing and what I want to present on at Breakpoint is basically this L2. It's pretty novel. It hasn't been done before. We're just finishing up the white paper. So we have a bunch of the designs. We've started building the MVP of it, which will be really cool. And given that Breakpoint is a bit later in the year, I'm quietly confident and optimistic that we can get to testnet at least by that time. So I'll have something to be able to demonstrate by the conference. So that would be really cool.
If this was your last question, then I have one of my own. So we are talking about, Solana ecosystem and then EVM ecosystems, as these are two different worlds, two different tribes. And with the protocols such as Layer 0, they are being connected from time to time. So I'm wondering, how do you envision, I don't know, in 2, 5, or 10 years, this omni-chain or multi-chain world will look like? Is it a realistic vision, that EVMs will be directly integrated with Sol and the other way around? Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think this whole omni-chain, everything's going to be a blockchain. I think the Bankless guys talked about there's going to be tens of thousands of blockchains. I'm going to be honest, as a Solana person, I just don't believe in that. And I don't think that's like the right thing to do. That just kind of feels like traditional finance again, where it's just like lots of layers and all these like independent banks and branches. And, all these people don't talk to each other using the same kind of messaging protocol. It's like just starts becoming clunky and having a lot of inefficiencies again. So I personally think that's not the way that we should be going. And that's kind of like misdirection. I think having too many L2s and too many rollups and too many crazy things and doing bridging, like it's honestly a bad experience. And to the extent that we can avoid it if possible, that's definitely like the way to go. So I think a lot of it in my mind will consolidate to the kind of main players. I think Solana is in a great spot where it's kind of head and shoulders above a lot of the competition and is really strong. Ethereum obviously just has tons of capital and has been around for a really long time. Like Bitcoin also just has like, the vast majority of all crypto value on it. And I don't know how I feel about the L2s on Bitcoin and this kind of DeFi ecosystem that's coming up, but I can definitely see some of the merits in terms of like tapping into the capital there. So I think there will be a couple of strong ecosystems. And I think you see this in most startup spaces is, there's going to be some kind of like consolidation to the top, 2 or 3 kind of chains, I think really kind of dominating the rest. And I think that's probably for the best. I think competition is good. And I think the less that, we have to bridge and kind of jump between 100 different chains, that's kind of great. I mean, speaking personally, like I, to be honest, don't really use any blockchains much outside of Solana and Ethereum, just because, like a lot of the protocols and primitives are on Ethereum. It's kind of convenient and it works well enough that I can kind of use it. And then Solana is obviously home ground for where I do a lot of stuff, but I'm just simply too lazy to have, 10 different wallets on 10 different chains, support like all these like random Cosmos things, have an Aptos and Sui wallet, do all this kind of stuff. Like I just can't remember all the logins to these different things. And I'm just going to forget my funds on like 10 different chains. So I just try and keep everything kind of consolidated. And I think that's why things like centralized exchanges are cool. Like I've been a long time user, I guess, of platforms like Binance. Everything's just in the one wallet. It's like the Power app. I don't have to like go and muck around. Like my capital is all there. I can move it around kind of quickly and conveniently. I can use it for margin for like any assets. I think that is kind of like the ideal experience, as opposed to like there's one DEX on this chain and then there's a Perps DEX somewhere else. And then I got to do the NFTs on another chain. I got to wait 15 minutes to bridge each one and then get like a haircut of like 2%, of my capital in each thing. I definitely don't think that's the way to go. But who knows? Maybe bridges get a ton cheaper and a ton faster and then it doesn't become a problem. But I'm like yet to see that happen.
Yeah, fair points. So to wrap things up, do you have any final words for those who are listening in? They want to make it in crypto. They believe in mass adoption. They're looking for the next thing to look out for. Any last words for them?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this idea of making it in crypto is like it's a bit of a stumbling block. People come in with high expectations and a lot of it is like financially motivated, obviously, to kind of make it big off the cycle, And I think that can kind of be a curse at the same time. Like you end up thinking so much about prices and tokens and all this kind of stuff that you don't actually experience crypto for what it is, which is this kind of like permissionless internet money and decentralized finance network. And that's why I've loved being more on the kind of builder side now, as opposed to trading, because I feel like trading is very PvP. It's kind of very zero sum. Whereas I think people getting more into the building side, I think it's exciting to create new applications, new use cases, actually like build something that helps people or solves problems. I think that's pretty interesting. And yeah, in general, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there in the crypto space. I don't think the barrier to entry is like crazy high. Like sure, there's a bit of cryptography and other things to like loosely understand, but if you can code basically, or if you can kind of join a team and do like BD or marketing and be really passionate about what they're building, I think that's like a great way to apply yourself. And yeah, hopefully the next couple of years are pretty bright for crypto. The market swings basically make it pretty unpredictable, but I'm kind of optimistic on the long term, definitely. So I think now is a good time. Things are still a little bit settled, and they're probably going to get very crazy in the next year or something or other. So I think it's a good time to start learning and start getting your feet wet.
That's awesome. Thanks again for sharing your time and your insights. I think what I really loved is your very pragmatic yet very optimistic approach to really building in crypto and taking on how to grow the pie for everyone. So thanks again, Tristan. Let's chat again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.